Welcome to Echoes of Swing. My name is April D. Shields, and we are sitting today with Mr. Dan Barrett, currently of Costa Mesa. Hey, Dan.
Hi.
Your band keeps disappearing in the
I know.
background.
I thought I was
Do it
entering
again
another
and you'll be
dimension.
Spock.
I just saw a Twilight Zone episode about that where the guy puts his hand through the wall into another dimension. Anyway.
Yeah, okay. Well, we've already started that pretty good. Well, you and I've known each other a long time. I would barely even attempt to put dates and years on that because that's been an awfully long time, and who knows when
Please
what
don't.
happened.
Yeah, please
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, I'm already feeling bad enough. My nephew just turned 21, so it's like,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. How is Andrew, by the way? I hadn't.
Andrew is 33.
Holy crap, Batman!
Nice editing. Yeah, he's 33 years old. He's become a very proficient ragtime piano player.
That's what I'd heard. Yeah.
And I don't say this lightly. He's an authority on that era of I could say popular music for piano,
Nice.
American popular music for piano, which includes ragtime, and there are different categories people use to label the different styles.
Yeah.
There's a style called novelty piano.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, ragtime, early jazz, and blues.
Yeah.
But he's very knowledgeable about the performers from all over the country in that era, and does research, I think, every day.
Wow.
He finds newspaper articles about piano players who were unknown virtually,
Yeah.
and then he tries to find out more about them and find their works if they were published. So he's doing real well, doing
Good
fine.
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the
Thanks for
last time I
asking.
saw him, he was still like a teenager or something in LA. And like you said, he was
Well,
like me, the bookworm, and interested in everything. And I think we had a very long conversation about who knows what, but it was interesting.
well, he's still only 4 or 5 years old to me.
Yeah, I know. The nephew I told you about that's 21, it's the same thing. I just see him
Right.
as 6 months old, and yeah,
And
it's
then I look at
crazy.
Andrew and I think how can a 4 or 5 year old kid be 6'2" with a beard?
I know. And old enough to drink. That doesn't
Yeah.
compute in the head at all. But he seems to have taken after you as far as your interest in the type of music, because I know you caught on pretty early yourself to that sort of thing.
Well, my friends and we gravitated toward an earlier style of jazz. And if anything, Andrew has gravitated toward the generation before that.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm interested in early jazz and the swing era, Andrew is even interested in much earlier music from the turn of the last century into the maybe early 1920s. That's where
Right.
he lives
Yeah.
musically.
Because if I remember correctly, and maybe I don't, who knows? There's been a lot of years that have cluttered it up here, but you were had been listening a lot as a young man to the South Frisco Jazz Band, if I remember correctly.
That's right. In fact, I've been thinking about them a lot.
Yeah.
Funny you bring them up. I inherited a kind of a treasure trove of LPs, now called vinyl, long play records, from an elderly jazz fan who passed away. And I was going through this box of LPs, and I found two musical arrangements, that is, the individual parts for a jazz band, two arrangements written by the trombone player Turk Murphy.
Really?
Who was one of the inspirations for the South Frisco Jazz Band.
Right.
And it's been on my mind to call Vince Saunders, the leader of the South Frisco Band, just to tell them about these arrangements.
Yeah.
An interesting thing to find in the middle of these records,
Right, that you don't expect.
I started playing the trombone in 5th grade. And my older brother, I had two, one passed away a couple years ago, unfortunately, but the middle brother, Mark, was in high school, but he was cast in a local college production of The Music Man.
Oh.
Because they needed someone to play the character Tommy Gilas, who was in love with the mayor's daughter.
Right.
If you remember The Music Man.
Yeah.
And Mark had a talent for acting, and his drama teacher recommended him for that role. So my parents and I would get dressed up and go over to Orange Coast College, and we saw Mark half a dozen times in The Music Man. And I got to where I was singing the songs and I really loved it. And of course, they have a marching band come out near the end onto the stage. And I saw the cornets and trombones. And I originally wanted to play the cornet because I understood that they played the melody more often than many of the other instruments. And I wanted to play the melodies to these tunes. So I wanted to play the cornet, but my band director said that maybe my chops, as we call them, my jaw and teeth, lips would be better suited for the trombone. So that was my second choice. So he started me on trombone when I was in 5th grade. I'll jump to years later. I saw him after I became a professional musician, and he said, I have a confession to make. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, when I told you your chops were better set up for trombone, he said, that really wasn't true. Your chops were fine for the trumpet. But he said, I needed trombone players in the band.
Sneaky.
And I absolved him and I said everything worked out.
Yeah,
fine,
forgive you, yes.
Right, piano and real kind man. But I was helping, it was the summer between 8th grade and my freshman year in high school. And I was just hanging around the band room. I liked Mr. Owen and I liked music, and I would help the younger students and kind of coach the trombone players. And we were talking one day, or I was talking with Mr. Owen, and I knew he was like a high school junior or senior. This guy came in, and I don't know if I should, I guess I could reveal a interesting sidebar to that. I'll do that later. But Mr. Owen said, oh, hi, Doug. How are you? Oh, fine, Mr. Owen. How are you doing? And Mr. Owen said, are you still playing piano? And he said, oh, yeah, I got a job at Shakey's Pizza Parlor. And I remember I'm about 14 years old, just ready to start high school. And I'm listening to all this. And Mr. Owen said, what are you doing in your spare time? And he said, oh, Friday and Saturday nights, I've been going to the Pizza Palace in Huntington Beach. And he said, there's a jazz band there playing there, the South Frisco Jazz Band. And I said, what are you talking about? Like what kind of a jazz band? And he said, oh, it's 7 pieces. They have a cornet and clarinet and trombone. And then they have piano and a banjo player. The banjo player leads the band. And they have a tuba player. And then they have a guy who plays washboard. And he's sensational. And I said, I said, oh, you mean like Dixieland? And this guy looked at me and he said, we don't call it that. We don't call it that. Dixieland means commercial and phony. No, this is the real thing. We call this traditional jazz. Oh, and he said, ask your folks. He said, if I can take you sometime, I'll take you over there. So my folks interviewed this guy to make sure it was okay. And, have Danny home by midnight.
Yeah.
So he drove me, I guess he picked me up at the house. This is so long ago. He drove me over to the Pizza Palace, and I opened the door. It was just a pizza joint like Shakey's or, And I opened the door and I heard this band blasting from the front of the room. And I thought, this is for me. This is great. Yeah. And I spent every Friday and Saturday night I could there. And Laura, my wife's brother, Brian Shaw, is a very respected trumpet player. He played for years with the High Sierra Jazz Band. We grew up playing together, but he and I were always at the Pizza Palace. And that was the first live jazz that I was exposed to. And I guess you could say it fostered my love for early jazz, New Orleans jazz, traditional jazz, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And the San Francisco style that Lou Waters and Turk Murphy played in the 40s and 50s and on up till Turk's death,
How neat, though, because I mean, there's who knows how many musicians Shakey's Pizza kind of made just for his love of that music. Because I mean, goodness, he started those in the 60s, I want to say, or maybe late 50s. I guess
I'd say right around 1960.
Yeah, pretty close.
Shaky Johnson, that was up in the Bay Area, right? Or
because there was one of the original ones. I just a few years ago was up in San Francisco area, and they were just about to tear that building down, and I just went no. But
even around here, there were half a dozen places between Los Angeles and down here where I am in Orange County that had either a solo piano player,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean a real, a real upright piano, not an electric keyboard, but a real upright piano. And often they'd have a piano and banjo. That was pretty common,
Mm-hmm.
And often the pianist or piano and banjo player, they would let guys sit in.
Right.
So the Yankees may have hired a solo piano player or a duo with the banjo, but it seems like there was always one or two guys, sitting in, and I was able to sit in and learn tunes and learn the style and learn how to play.
Perfect school. Yeah.
Yeah, I did my share sitting in at those places,
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's something that I know you and I have talked about a lot over the years, but a lot of other folks that we know mutually, of how none of us would have spent as much time in this music as we have if it hadn't have been for people being kind and patient and willing to help and willing to let you sit in, willing to just
right.
be your friend or be a mentor or be something, because otherwise we would have lost interest or just have gotten discouraged or let our own little personal nagging points just cut us out. But who would you say are some of the strongest ones that helped support you to keep you on with what you've decided to eventually do with your life as far as music is concerned?
Oh my gosh. The first guy I think of is Frank Demond, who played trombone with the South Frisco Jazz Band. And he left a very successful business, I think he was a building contractor, to move to New Orleans. And he replaced Big Jim Robinson with the Preservation Hall Jazz Band when Big Jim became too ill to travel and play.
Right.
And Frank idolized Big Jim and played in a style very similar to Big Jim's style. But Frank was very encouraging to me, taught me a lot, talked to me about music theory. Frank also played piano and banjo. So he was an early influence. Then there was a coterie, this is the first word I thought of New Orleans musicians who, they were of the generation, they were all born, I'll say between 1895 and maybe 1910, that generation of musicians who had, for one reason and another, relocated into the Los Angeles area. And my own theory about that, it's probably not worth a book, but maybe an essay about why so many New Orleans musicians came to California.
Yeah.
And they started coming in the 20s, 30s, and on into the 40s. And my own theory was it was because of the film industry in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And not so much to play in the movies themselves, although many of them did, soundtracks and things. And when you need in the 40s, a noir movie where the detective goes to a nightclub and you need a jazz band, occasionally you see some of these guys for fleeting seconds,
Yeah.
But moreover, it was just for entertainment for people working in the music industry or in the film industry. The gaffers, the lighting people, the sound people, the prop people, anyone connected with Hollywood, they needed entertainment.
Yeah.
And this is long before video
television
existed, long before television for that matter, So if you wanted to go out and hear some music, you went out to hear live music. And the way it was described to me, there were bands of varying sizes, from little trios up to big bands, playing all up and down Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah,
if you went to a nice hotel, you'd find a big band. If you went to a little club or a bar, there might be a piano player or a trio in the corner, So I'm sure the early men and women who migrated from New Orleans stayed in touch with their friends and relatives and said, hey, this, it's happening out here.
Yeah.
In Southern California, come on out. The climate is better than New Orleans. And there was racism, and there still is everywhere. But it was probably
not as aggressive.
A marginally better racial climate than in the Deep South, out here in California. But But anyway, getting back to the thread of the story, there were these jazz societies that would meet on Sunday afternoons in Orange County and Los Angeles. And each society had a dedicated Sunday of the month when they would meet. So you could go to the Hot Jazz Society on the first Sunday of the month, for instance, and then Jazz Forum would meet on the second Sunday, and the New Orleans Hot Jazz Society of Southern California on the third Sunday, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
so every Sunday, my parents would take me to a different jazz society, and I'd have my little trombone case or big trombone case, and,
as big as you are.
Sign in as a musician, right, in those days, and get to play with amateurs and professionals. And I got to meet many of these men from New Orleans. So you're asking about people who had a big influence on me and helped me. One of the New Orleans musicians was Andy Blakeney.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he was in his, he must have been right around 70, and I was about 15. And Andy Blakeney actually played with King Oliver's band.
I remember, yeah.
The Dixie Syncopators, after Oliver had the Creole Jazz Band in Chicago. Right. That band broke up, and Oliver formed a slightly bigger band, the Dixie Syncopators. They made many records. But Blakeney didn't record with them, but he was in the band.
Right.
For a brief period of time. I think in the 30s, he played with Lionel Hampton. And then all through the 40s and 50s, he played with Kid Ory's band in San Francisco. That's my cat wreaking havoc.
Well, when she's awake, mine's asleep, and I'll bet you once yours is asleep, mine will wake up. Like little kids.
They're communicating with each other that way.
Yeah, right. They're doing the feline, how do we screw this up thing?
They're good at it too.
They're very good. Very smart.
They're pros. So Andy Blakeney was one. Joe Derensburg, great clarinet player from Baton Rouge, who also played with the Ory Band, played with Louis Armstrong. And he's on Armstrong's record of Hello, Dolly, the clarinet.
Oh, is he? Oh, okay.
Joe Derensburg.
Yeah.
I remember him as being one of the funniest men I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
Just like his mission was to make you laugh. You know?
Kind of like Saunders when he was sober. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell your audience about Tom Saunders, and for those who don't know about Tom. And we have so many inside references, April. I know.
That's the problem with interviewing friends. It's just I keep going there, and I keep going, I shouldn't do that. Saunders was a cornet player, which I know you ended up picking up later as far as an instrument, and doing very well at it. When I was 6 years old, my light bulb moment, yours was walking into Pizza Palace. Mine was, my folks had taken me to the Sacramento Festival, and I was 6, hated it.
6? Oh, hated it?
Yeah, okay. I hated it. Because I couldn't understand how all these people could be playing these different notes, and I didn't understand. I couldn't connect the dots. So Abe Most had a set, and Saunders was in the back with Wild Bill, being Saunders. You could hear him through the whole venue. And the big booming voice, not very tall. Yeah. And so Abe called him up, and I was watching Saunders intently because he'd obviously had a few drinks, and I was waiting for him to basically blow in that horn and pass out.
Oh.
And so he started playing Black Coffee, and that's when it suddenly dawned on me, oh, okay, it's more communication within rules, but that's how they can interact, and that's how it comes together. And it's kind of just like, oh, okay. And that's when my folks suddenly decide, okay, let's go. And, I have this heaven opening epiphany, and my folks are like, yeah, it's late.
Yeah. And you didn't want to leave.
No. And so Saunders somehow or another from the stage, it was the Martinique Room in at the Red Lion, or what used to be the Red Lion. I don't know what
I
it
remember
is now.
it well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of us do. Done our time there. And he followed us out, and he asked my dad, just made conversation. Where are you guys from? Enjoying it, da 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 da. And where are you going now? And Dad said, well, it's late, getting late. We're going to our room. And Saunders looked at me and went, you don't want to go, do you? And I kind of sidled away from my mother so I wouldn't get smacked. And I'm like,
yeah.
No, I don't. And so he just grabbed my hand, looked at my dad, and said, I'll take her back when she's tired. What's your room number? And if you have a spare key, I won't wake you up when I bring her back. And my dad, who never did that ever before and never again, just reached into his pocket and grabbed the extra room key and handed it to Saunders and told him the room number. And off I go while my mother is about ready to go into apoplexy.
Yeah.
And Dad came down later that night, like at about midnight or so, and he said I was sitting at the bar between Wild Bill and Saunders. And Wild Bill, Wild Bill being Wild Bill, and Saunders. So after that, they would show up at the jazz festivals, and I'd hang out with them, my folks mostly. But then there would come a time where I go, can I go listen to Saunders? And so they just bring me to the venue and hand me to Saunders and hand him the room key. And so after that, every year it was just that. So to me, he became very much like another parent / grandparent. As you know, you've watched him in action on that.
Sure.
But he understood that I liked the music, and he wanted to make sure I was in an environment where I could learn as much as I could in those short periods of time at festivals, but in a safe way.
Yeah.
So that,
And whether he'd been drinking or not, he was looking out for you, obviously, and kept you right there. And,
yeah. He never, he was always on the alert for somebody else that had bad motives, but he was always, if I got up and left somewhere, he threatened to throw me in Paul Keller's bass case. Don't you walk off without telling me again. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, great. So, well, your father was obviously a real good judge of character, because I remember Tom as just a great guy, a great human being, and of course a swinging player. I loved playing with him. Wish I could have played with him more, but I did get to play with him many times at the jazz parties and festivals.
Yeah. Well, I know he enjoyed playing with you a lot in Monterey, because he'd go, how many sets I got with this person? How many sets I got with this person? And he'd keep calling while I was making the schedule. Make sure I get another set with this person. I'm like, Saunders, you want to do the schedule? Because you're pissing me off. But I have some pictures I'll have to share with you. Some pictures I've remembered taking at some point or another in Monterey at various different times, including you with George Masso.
Oh, another hero of mine. Boy,
I was going to ask you about George, because I just thought he was just one of the most wonderful, sweet people I'd ever met. And
he passed away. George passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He was from Rhode Island. I'm not sure if he was from Providence originally or Narragansett. I'm not sure, but Rhode Island. And we met at a jazz party in Texas. And I was the new kid on the block, and here I am with George Masso. I'd known about him from recordings with the World's Greatest Jazz Band and other bands, and he couldn't have been more gracious. And another very funny guy, and just a good sense of humor. We did one CD together called "Let's Be Buddies."
I know, I love that one.
Yeah, that's the one where I look like Charles Manson on the cover.
Thanks, Dan. Now I'll never be able to look at that album ever again without thinking of Charlie. Just don't cut anything in your forehead and you'll be fine.
Yeah, right. Don't judge a CD by its cover.
No, exactly.
George sounded beautiful on that and wrote a few of the arrangements.
Yeah.
We had a good time doing that one.
Thank you.